Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 569, and today's date is January 17th, 2015, and the title of this episode is A Current Economic Collapse News Brief. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand from government officials, and not just here in the United States, across Europe and other countries, we realize that they're trying to convince us that we're in a recovery. They continually throw at us statistical numbers to convince us. They have us look at the stock market, and they're trying to tell us that, yes, since it's going up, since precious metals are being suppressed, we are in a recovery. And we will give you more statistical numbers to convince you. I don't care if you feel it or not. Makes no difference to me, as long as you believe us that we're in a recovery. But we know we're not. We know that the real economic indicators, and from what that's going on here, we realize that things are declining very quickly right now. We realize that people are getting laid off. There are more and more layoffs. We realize they can't find work. Actually, a lot of the people now are starting to wake up, and they might not be able to put their finger on it, but they feel something's wrong. Those people who are working in jobs, who send out their resumes and aren't getting any answers back, they're starting to scratch their heads and say, why is this happening? They're telling us that we're down to 5.6% unemployment, but I can't find work. I mean, we see more and more store closings. We see factories closing down. Caterpillar, they're closing a factory in Franklin. 150 jobs are going to be lost. They continually tell us that there's no inflation. We don't see anything. But from their actual report from the BLS, it shows inflation. But they don't like to tell everyone this. They don't want to show everyone this. The corporate media kind of forgets about it. They keep telling us, no, there's no inflation. The Fed comes out and tells us there's nothing. But when I go to the supermarket and I go to purchase food, I realize, and I keep track, that yes, things have gone up. Yes, things will fluctuate up and down. We'll see the price come down a little bit because fuel has dropped. But overall, annually, coming from the BLS report, what do we see? And this is from them. And of course, as we know, these are manipulated numbers, so you know this figure is much, much worse. Food at home, 3.7% increase. Food away from home, 3.0% increase. Meat, increase this year annually, I'm talking about 2014, 12.7%. Fish and seafood up by 5.6%. Eggs up by 10.7%. Milk up by 5.2%. Fruit and vegetables up by 4.1%. Coffee 4%. Butter 22%. Natural gas 5.8%. Footwear 2.8%. Prescription drugs 6.4%, college textbooks 5%, cigarettes 3%, and it goes on and on and on. And this tells us that, yes, we have seen inflation. These are the things that we purchase every day. These are the things that we use on an everyday basis, but they don't like to report on that. They like to show you everything else, things that we really don't need that might be going down in price. You don't really go out and buy a Blu-ray player that often, and they might say, look, prices have dropped on Blu-ray. Look, prices have dropped on HD TV. Well, a lot of times that happens because the technology gets better and better, and they find ways to make it a lot easier and faster and more economical, and that's why the prices go down. But things that we use every day, prices are going up, and I see it every single time I walk into the supermarket. Every time I want to purchase milk, if I want to purchase fruit, if I want to purchase meat, I see prices going up, and these are the things that I use every day. Actually, we've been seeing gasoline prices continually going up until they've suppressed them, but we might see gasoline prices go right back up. Now, we see Russia and Venezuela, they are getting closer and closer together. And as we know, Russia and China, they have been making business deals all around the world. China and Russia are looking to take their currency, their BRIC system, and they're looking to spread it around the world and bring everyone into the system, and they're making deals and loaning the money. Meanwhile, the United States government has the private Western central banking system, and they're putting troops everywhere. They're maneuvering military assets. They're controlling what they've had for all these years with military force. So you can see the difference here of what's going on. Russia and Venezuela have agreed to increase cooperation in joint oil exploration and promise to work together to protect oil markets as well as restore the prices. We have agreed to step up the investment and participation of Russian companies and their share of joint ventures in the Orinoco oil belt and other projects. The Orinoco oil and gas basins is located in eastern Venezuela and has more than 250 oil and 19 gas fields, the world's largest deposits of heavy oil. The oil fields in Orinoco oil basin and offshore gives Venezuela the world's largest reserves. This is why the U.S. government has been trying for years to get into Venezuela. This is why they've been staging the protests, just like they're doing in Russia, China, Ukraine, and many other countries, especially in the Middle East, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to change the government, have a regime change in these countries. They want to put a puppet government into these areas so they can take the natural resources, steal them, and put them on the U.S. dollar to prop up the system. And we can see this has been going on for quite a while. Now, out in Europe, we can see that Fitch has downgraded Greece's currency rating outlook to negative right now. And of course they have. When they were with, when they're dealing with the IMF, the Eurozone, and they're continually giving them tons and tons of debt, they really don't do that much. They said, yeah, we'll downgrade a little bit, but now we see they're continually downgrading them because they're thinking about not imposing austerity. They might not pay off their debt. They might leave the Eurozone and maybe go over to Russia. And Russia has asked Greece and proposed to them that, listen, if you exit the Eurozone, we will drop the food ban. And they might do it because if we look at the situation there, if they stay with the Eurozone, we understand Europe, the IMF, has put them into a huge amount of debt. Their youth unemployment is over 50%. Their everyday unemployment their total unemployment, I should say, is 25%. Things have not gotten better. The people there have suffered. They had to impose austerity where more and more people lost their jobs, lost their income. They have no way of surviving. They might be looking at this situation and saying, you know something, we've had enough of this. Let's make more deals with China. Let's go along with Russia. Let's look at the situation and say, you know what, maybe it would be better off if we join them. And they just might do it. We're going to have to watch this very carefully. Now, out in Germany, we see there are a lot of protests going on out there, and there's a protest right now where thousands of people are marching against the TTIP and the GMOs in Berlin. They're saying we are fed up. A broad alliance of farmers, ethical consumers, and anti-capitalist activists staged a march through Berlin that numbered up to about 50,000 people to denounce the proposed TTIP treaty between U.S. and the EU. More than 120 organizations joined the 5th annual We Are Fed Up demonstrations, and I completely agree with them. We're all getting fed up with what's going on here. We're all getting fed up with our governments telling us this is in our best interest when we know it's really in their best interests. And we can see right now that people will be rising up, and we can see across the entire world right now, they are getting prepared for this. They realize when this collapse comes that people are going to be upset, angry, pissed off. They're going to lose a lot of their money. They're not going to have jobs. And people will start rioting. And they definitely are getting prepared for this because we see that they're nationalizing the police forces here in the United States. They're giving them all these fabulous prizes and gifts like Kevlar armor, machine guns, ammunition, technology to spy on the people, tanks. So we can see right now they're getting a lot of these type of devices. And we also see in Europe, the Eurozone has created the European police, which could be dispatched to any country if that country couldn't handle the crisis. We see Spain is training their police officers for civil disobedience. And we see many other areas where they're purchasing things like water cannons to keep control of the situation. And we understand that when this collapse comes, they're going to have to try to control what is going on. And this is why they've been spying on every single person, because they want to know who is going to be a threat to their authority. This is why they're ramping up the spy programs. This is why we saw this false flag, and all of a sudden, all these countries now have troops on the ground. They're pushing their agendas of spying on more and more people, violating all of your rights. Now, out in Ukraine, we see they're taking a 2-day truce in Lugansk, and this is for a holiday. They agreed on a ceasefire on January 18th and 19th, so as to mark the Epiphany, the holiday the Orthodox Christians in Russia and Ukraine celebrate, and they're going to take a time off of fighting while they observe this holiday. But we can see in Ukraine the fighting has not stopped. It's intensifying, and we realize what's going on there. The Kiev government, they are getting ready for a major offensive. They're ready to make their move. They're waiting for the right false flag event to blame the southeastern people or Russia. And we can see it's building up by more and more people being drafted into the army, more and more lethal weapons coming in. They're getting ready and prepared. Now, yesterday I reported on the United States was going to send about 400 trainers to train the Syrian moderates, but we see that number is now being bumped up. We see this a lot, actually. The number of troops that are always going into Iraq usually end up to be a lot more than what they're saying. So right now the Pentagon has announced that a mission to train the moderate Syrian oppositions may involve over 1,000 U.S. troops. Earlier they said about 400, but John Kirby was out there saying, no, it's going to be 1,000 plus. We're not sure right now. And we can see right now this is total mission creep, and we know these are combat-ready Marines ready to go. And we also know that President Obama is trying to get troops into this area. Everything is set up in Iraq to accept these troops. The air base, the division headquarters, they are prepared. They have military assets now being transferred from Afghanistan down into Kuwait, into depots, to get ready to mount their offensive, and they're just getting ready, and soon we will see this happen. Now we see the United States and the UK, they are having a joint cyber cell exercise. The United States and the United Kingdom are working on establishing a joint cyber cell that will help two countries improve cooperation on cybersecurity. Very interesting. The joint exercise will be on the financial sector. So they want to see what are the weaknesses, what do we have to protect, but is that really what they're doing? Now, we understand they have already implemented kill switches on the stock exchange BATS and NASDAQ systems. So when the market starts to fall, they can kill it and stop it whenever they want. We also see that when a cyber attack actually hits, the FDIC does not cover this whatsoever. So if you lose money during this time period, the FDIC is not going to come to your aid, because this is not part of that insurance. They have separate insurance that will deal with this, but we'll have to see if they actually will cover the losses. And we know when these cyber attacks hit, basically what they're going to do is shut down everything, and they have the bail-in documents to go into the bank to bail out the documents, to bail out the banks, I should say. And we can see right now the joint exercises in the financial sector will help the UK and the United States deal with whatever is coming. And I talked about this in my other reports back in 2003 when I was in Manhattan and we had that blackout. I do believe this was a test to see if they could bring down the power grid, and they were successful in doing so. Just like in the World Trade Center when they had the bombing underneath the World Trade Center towers, that was a test to see how things would go and what they could do. And we can see they do this quite a bit. And we know for a fact that when this attack hits, it will be from the inside. It will be from the governments, because as we know, they push their agenda and they use false flag events to get the people to do what they want to do. We already see a cyber attack on the New York Post and the United Press International, UPI. And what's very interesting about this is all going on during the time period when they're trying to get CISPA, or that rewritten version of CISPA, passed. And all of a sudden they're ramping up these cyber attacks. But the message is very interesting, where the message was World War III is declared by the Pope. China and the United States engaged in a serious military battle. Why would the hackers put that message on the feeds? Just like when the Syrian Electronic Army put on a lot of the corporate medias which they hacked, they put China dropped the dollar. They wouldn't do that. This is very interesting to me, and we know the Syrian Electronic Army is a fictitious hacking group which is made up probably most likely by the CIA, Mossad, MI6 to convince us that Syria is hacking the United States. But on these Twitter feeds, they were filled with reports of China condemning President Obama's pivot to Asia before firing on and damaging of the USS George Washington, an American aircraft carrier based in the Pacific. The feeds also stated that the U.S. was involved in active combat against China in the South China Sea. U.S. Joint Chief of Staff, USS George Washington damage. U.S. Navy now engaged in active combat against Chinese vessels in the South China Sea. And these were the readings from the tweets. So we can see this is a very interesting message that they're throwing at us. They're trying to tell us that, yes, war is coming, and we know it is. We've been following this for a very long time, and we can see, because of all these false flag events, they're putting troops all over the place in each one of the countries. Spain, France, and now Belgium. They're putting about 300 soldiers, and they will be deployed in the capital, Brussels, and they will stay there. And we can see a lot of the countries are doing this. The UK is doing it. Everyone is getting ready. They're putting their troops on high alert, getting prepared for the collapse of the entire system. In the meantime, they're of course trying to take away more and more of your rights because they need to understand who is a threat. They're also telling us that there's up to 20 sleeper cells comprising of 120 to 180 people ready to strike in European countries. They're already telling us that there's sleeper cells here in the United States. Now, I talked about this many reports back, where we talked about lone wolf groups, and I actually had a picture of a wolf wearing an eye patch and an AK-47. Now, we understand these people have already been pre-positioned. This is not terrorists. These are government terrorist assets. They have been put into place. They are getting ready for the false flag event. This is what is coming, and they're trying to keep everyone prepared. But what's very interesting about all this terrorism, and we know that all their methods to protect us actually does not work because they're not really put into place to protect us. They're really put into place to scare us, to spy on us. But the real terrorism facts might be a little stunning to many of the people out there. Daniel Benjamin, the coordinator for the counterterrorism at the United States Department of State from 2009 to 2012, gave us some information here that the total number of deaths from terrorism in recent years has been extremely small in the West. Despite the horror, there have actually been very few terror attacks in Europe. Non-Muslims have carried out the vast majority of terrorist attacks on U.S. soil. And we know a lot of them were patsies, set up. Non-Muslims also carried out the vast majority of terrorist attacks in Europe. The overwhelmingly majority of victims of Muslims' terror attacks are in fact Muslims. Governments have admitted that many terror attacks around the world have actually been carried out by the government forces and blamed on their enemies as a way to justify war on their objectives. So we can see right now that all of this, everything that is coming, is to shift the blame for this economic collapse. They're going to blame it on another group, and you can see how they're making a big deal about Muslims, how they're comparing them to Nazis, how they're continually playing this up because they're trying to divide everyone. There's going to have those people who are non-Muslim and those people who are Muslim. And we know for a fact this is not true. This is what the governments like to do. They want people to take sides. They've done it all throughout history, and they're getting prepared for the next war. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.